President Buhari assures Leah Sharibu's mother of the administration's commitment for her safe return.
Federal government sets up committee on prioritizing human capital development.
INEC presents certificate of return to Osun State Governor-elect and Deputy Bino Shubu.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall take a look at the growing number of out-of-school children.
Do you know that your child or children do have their rights? And these, are also human rights.
Well, that's right, Kirian. In line with the 2003 Child Rights Act, one of such rights is the recognition of the access to basic education as part of the bundle of rights of any child.
Indeed, Kingsley, and so it's not just a moral obligation on our part as parents, guardians, or education program handlers within the society. It is a legal obligation which should be equally matched with such concerted efforts worthy of our serious attention.
And earlier in the year, at the opening of the Presidential Summit on Education, President Muhammadu Buhari, considering the significance of the education sector, expressed his administration's commitment to make a significant change.
There, the president lamented the obvious decay with emphasis on high illiteracy level, infrastructural deficit and decay, unqualified teachers, and inadequate infrastructural materials and other challenges as bane to the sector's development.
Well, Kiriam, let's step back a bit. 4 years ago, according to statistics credited to UNICEF, Nigeria had some 10.5 million out-of-school children, and 60% of those children were in northern Nigeria.
And today, the figure is sure on the upward stretch, as no fewer than 13.2 million children are said to be out of school. Equally worrisome is that about 60% of out-of-school children are girls. And for many who do enroll, they drop out early. Issues on low perceptions of the value of education for girls and early marriages are given as reasons.
Now, while the school enrollment rate is said to have improved in some areas, it would appear to have also raised other concerns. And indeed, attaining quality education without doubt will ensure that the launchpad to a more empowered and productive nation ready to compete globally would be met. However, for that stage to be attained for a more prosperous future, we might, of course, have to be more concerned about the out-of-school children phenomenon, which appears to have been left unattended.
Well said, Kingsley, and that is one part of our discussion this morning. And now, are you also aware that some people think that the organized labor just does nothing but pushing out workers to go on strike? Well, we have a second discussion which is going to focus on something of great interest for every Nigerian worker.
Yes, indeed. We'll be taking a look at the strategic efforts by the nation's leading trade unions to deliver affordable housing to the workforce all over the country.
Now, this is in conjunction with the Federal Mortgage Bank. So with the National Housing Fund contribution in place, the program is expected to deliver access to safe and decent 250,000 housing units yearly to their registered members. What are the building blocks? We will find out in the course of the program. It's on that note that I welcome you to today's edition of Good Morning Nigeria, broadcast live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. My name is Kirian Umayo.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolov, joining Kirian to also welcome you to the program, in the course of which we shall have our regular complimentary segments, including newspaper review, business, sports, and others. But first, let's take the highlights of the morning news with Comfort Amodo. Hi, Comfort. Good morning.
Good morning, Kirian and Kingsley. And here's the morning news. President Muhammadu Buhari has promised the Sharibu family that he would do all in his power to rescue Leah Sharibu from the hands of Boko Haram and bring her home. The president, who spoke to Leah Sharibu's mother, Rebecca, on telephone said, and I quote, "I convey my emotion, the strong commitment of my administration, and the solidarity of all Nigerians to you and your family, as we'll do our best to bring your daughter home in peace and safety." End of quote. The president assured the mother that his heart is with her family as that of the entire nation, which continues to pray for her safe return. Now, the federal government has set up a 20-man human capital investment steering committee towards prioritizing and improving the human capital development base in Nigeria. This was made known after a meeting of the National Economic Council's Human Capital Development Core Working Committee, chaired by the Vice President Yemi Osinbajo.
The new commitment, even at the level of the states, because we can't go far except the states are really on the table. There is enough federal government commitment, enough of federal government involvement, but we need to bring the states on board and looking at the problems. How can we make our people live longer? How can we improve skills? How can we make sure that people live better, live longer? How do we ensure that they have water? So these are issues that are quite really dear to the heart of federal government.
We have received a presentation on the framework for further investments in the key areas of health, education, social inclusion, as well as empowerment. We've had a very good meeting, and we hope that the outcome of the meeting and the work of the co-working group will bring out very clear plans and strategies to invest more in education, in healthcare, nutrition, empowerment, gender inclusion, as well as job creation for our young people.
So empowerment is not only government's job, it's also private sector job. You see, unless we make this place to work, even our own businesses are at risk. You know, I need both of us, all of us, we need to actually support government and make sure that these things are done properly.
The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, has presented certificate of return to Osun State Governor-elect Alhaji Boygai Oyetola and his deputy Benedict Alabi at the Commission's headquarters in Osogbo.
Let me once again reassure all stakeholders in the nation's electoral process that the present INEC, under the leadership of Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, will never do anything that will alter the gains it has so far achieved in terms of credibility.
We are going to work together to ensure that we justify the confidence that people have given to us. It's a mandate, it's a sacred mandate, and I cherish the law.
The Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Abubakar Malami, says government is committed to the promotion and protection of human rights in Nigeria. The Attorney General stated this in a message to the Northwest consultation on the Nation Action Plan held in Kaduna.
Your contribution to this document today will contribute in no small measure in setting a defined human rights agenda for Nigeria for the next couple of years.
It's meant at holding accountable those who violate human rights, to make sure that we put measures in place to make sure there's progressive improvement in human rights.
Now, the federal government has denied any increase in the tuition fees charged by federal universities or any tertiary institution funded from the Federation account. A statement released by Ben Bemgun, Deputy Director and Head of Press, Federal Ministry of Education, in reaction to stories making the rounds. The government is planning an increase of 350,000 naira in universities' fees. The Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Education, Sonny Echono, emphatically denied the claim. The Permanent Secretary said apart from lacking in merit and logic, it is strange and curious that the story is coming at a time government is investing heavily in the school feeding program designed to bring more children on board the ship of the education sector. He asked all well-meaning Nigerians to disregard the story in its entirety. Now, time and time again, we are told that for any meaningful development to take place, peace must be prevalent. Apparently, this truth is sinking in gradually to people of the Niger Delta region. That explains why leaders and other key players, including ex-militants there, have resolved to maintain peace and support the federal government in its commitment to develop manpower and infrastructure in the region. This is coming as the Presidential Amnesty Program has embarked on a creek-to-creek amnesty awareness campaign in Edo and Delta states.
We will give this government peace. For some prompt payment he has been making, at least I think he needs some accolade for that. We are ready to work on Buhari in 2019.
Buhari government, we will try.
The Buhari government to amnesty is a success story. With the support of Buhari, amnesty has been able to, there's an increase in oil production.
We are not just there in Abuja, we have to relate with you even at the grassroots level.
Social justice and empathy have been identified as critical requirements for entrenchment of alternative dispute resolution in the society. This was brought to the fore at a one-day sensitization forum on the use of alternative dispute resolution mechanism for promotion of social justice in Nigeria, held in Bauchi. The campaign was put together by the National Orientation Agency, NOAA.
Today, if something happens in our families, in our homes, in our villages, that is the method we use.
And that's the news highlight for now. Good morning, Nigeria. We'll continue with Kingsley and Kieran after this break.
The program is Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. Now we turn to business. Nigeria Deposit Insurance Corporation, NDIC, and the Central Bank of Nigeria collaborate to protect depositors' funds through effective supervision of banks as well as timely resolution of distressed financial institutions. Details of these on Business News.
The federal government, apart from creating more access to finance to improve ease of doing business in the country, is also committed to bridging the gap of housing deficit in the country through improved housing programs and policies for the benefits of its citizens. The federal government recently injected 500 billion naira into the Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria to improve access to mortgage loans and home ownership for Nigerians for the next 5 years.
A mortgage guarantee company will be launched by hopefully by the president before the end of the year. We are looking at end of November, and that mortgage guarantee component will serve to widen and bringing us the tail end of the modern mortgage system.
The additional capital is also aimed at encouraging investors to provide more funding as FBN seeks to boost its capital from 5 billion naira at a rate of 100 billion naira a year.
The institutions that are lending to our people can actually have a share. They can share risk because the credit risk that they are bearing can be shared by the mortgage guarantee company so that more people will have access to housing finance.
Meanwhile, Nigerian Deposit Insurance Corporation and CBN has jointly conducted an on-site and off-site supervision of 25 deposit money banks, 1 non-interest bank, 108 microfinance banks, and 38 primary mortgage banks, using the risk-based examination of 3 banks with holding companies. And NDIC has paid the sum of 11.50 billion naira to depositors, creditors, stakeholders, and other stakeholders of closed financial institutions as at December 31, 2017. The Managing Director and Chief Executive, NDIC Alhaji Umaru Ibrahim, disclosed that 368.43 billion naira was recovered by the corporation from debtors of failed banks during the period under review, bringing total recoveries to 28.84 billion naira to date, noting that 21.85 billion naira has so far been realized from the sale of physical assets of closed banks as at 2017. And these are the closing figures of trade on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange.
right, thank you very much for the business package. Next for us now, we'll take a look at the front pages of some of the papers we have with us this morning.
And time for us now to review today's national dailies. And Bayo Atoyebi, our reviewer, is here with us in the studio. Bayo, it's good morning to you.
Thank you, Kirian. Good morning. Good morning, Kinsley. Good morning, Nigeria.
Right,
well, we have stories touching politics, economy, and what have you. But let's begin with the Daily Trust newspaper. Just below the nameplate, to have a dust as more candidates emerge for Senate. That story is on page 16. No cause for alarm over dwindling foreign reserves, says CBN. And the main headline on the Daily Trust newspaper, APC. Adamawa, Enugu, Kwara, governorship primaries hold today. Election panel cancels exercise in Zamfara over violence. Ambode accepts defeat, pledges to work with Sanwo-Olu. All right, now below the photograph on the Daily Trust, where we have the remains of Corporal Effiong and the Woke. Now, below that, we have a missing general, Army cordon subdue arrest calls, is on page 4. How volcanic-like eruption hits FCT, on page 3. Buhari phones Leah Sharibu's mother, says, I will do my best.
All right, let's go to the Punch newspaper. The Punch is, of course, very busy with a number of stories headlined on the front page. Now, from top to bottom, above the nameplate of the Punch newspaper, World Bank cuts Nigeria and others' growth forecast to 2.7%. Details of that story can be found on page 23. There's a contradictory headline on that. This is coming from New Telegraph, above the nameplate of New Telegraph. It says, World Bank cuts Nigeria's 2018 growth forecast to 1.9% and decries headers farmers' crisis and frets over region's rising debts. And CBN dismisses fears over foreign reserves decline. That's on page 30. So we return to the Punch newspaper, and the other headlines there. Primaries, President meets El-Rufai and Akeredolu, that's page 7. Federal government denies tuition hike, says Education Bank underway. Details of the story can be found on page 12. These are headlines on the front page of the Punch newspaper. If we just have a single shot of the Punch newspaper, we might have a better view of it. That's a lot better. It says, Buhari calls Leah Sharibu's mother, promises daughter's safe return. That's on page 14. Now, 2 earpieces there beside the nameplate. Oil price jumps to $86, that's per barrel, and Putin blames Trump. And then it says mobile apps gaining popularity among Nigeria's bank customers. The lead story is on politics out of Lagos. Ambode accepted defeat to avert impeachment. The Punch is attributing that story to sources, and that's on page 7 in greater detail. Governor, that's Ambode, congratulates Sanwo-Olu and pledges commitment to Lagos development. The photograph is out of Bayelsa State. That's somewhere in Yenagoa. That's the capital of Bayelsa State, showing a house that's been flooded in the state. And then, of course, below that you have a number of other headlines. At the foot of the front page says, missing general, soldiers cordon off Plateau District. And Kebbi motorcyclist dies after colliding with camel. That's on page 4. And Amakura protests commissioner's removal from senatorial race, page 10. Bio.
I've heard of horsepower. I've never heard of camel power. It's amazing, a motorcycle colliding with camel.
Yeah, in fact, the details of the story, Bio, by the way, and Kyria, I found a bit curious and revealing. They said it was in the evening, and the cyclists were riding without his headlights on, apparently returning from the farm, and then ran into the camel. I think he fell, and then the camel now began to stamp on him, and then beat him to death, as it were. I didn't know that the camel was that aggressive. I thought that the camel probably had the same disposition as a donkey.
No, by hitting the camel, you have already attacked the camel.
Naturally.
So it was in defense that the camel did what it did, because the camel wouldn't have known why the attack, you know. And then when you ram into a camel, of course you must have wounded the camel so badly.
And fine, I'm just talking about the behavior of a camel. A donkey, for instance, is literally very passive, if you like, mild-mannered, as it were.
A donkey is passive.
In animal kingdom,
Very docile.
when
But when you provoke a donkey, you get an unforgettable kick from a donkey.
Yes,
I see.
And when it's provoked. But
No, a horse is very well done. I have seen a giraffe, of course, when you watch some of these things on television, you see a giraffe, if it's provoked or if it feels endangered, can kill a lion, by stamping it to death.
The neck is its
Yes, that's right. Bayo, so continue.
Well, President Muhammad Buhari yesterday put a call to Rebecca Sharibu, mother of the Dapchi girl, who was abducted in February along with 101 school colleagues, but was held back by Boko Haram. The president in the statement said his administration will do everything to bring her daughter back home. He said that his heart is with the family, and like the entire nation, we all continue to pray for the safe return of the daughter. Mrs. Sharibu and her husband Nathan all on Sunday appealed to the president to ensure that the return of their daughter before the deadline of October mentioned by Boko Haram. The other interesting story is about the economy. Two papers are now having conflicting figures. One is giving 2.7 as the growth margin, while the other is saying it's about 1.9. But the central bank has indicated that the recent decrease in the foreign reserve has nothing to do with ongoing political activities. It clarified that, in fact, the reserve depletion is a result of global squeeze on economy generally. This is a factor of what the Director of Corporate Communication, Isaac Okorafor, described as expansion, the growth squeeze that has led to increase in interest rates in the United States. The Nigerian reserve is currently at $44 billion. Now the story about the politics. Internal democracy continued to dodge the two lead political parties, particularly the All Progressive Congress and the People's Democratic Party. As the last count, the nation reports that staggering parallel primaries has become a matter of contention across several states. For the APC, there have been parallel primaries in Delta, Rivers, Ogun, and Cross River. Similarly, in the People's Democratic Party, parallel primaries in Rivers, Yobe, Cross River, and Delta has been a challenge. And we have always emphasized this. Internal democracy has been the challenge of all political parties. Meanwhile, senatorial aspirants have begun to emerge across the nation.
I think about the beauty of the exercise in some states, as Nigerians have, witnessed, is the direct primaries, which is more transparent. People queue up and vote, as against the use of delegates, in such elections. So, and that's why the fight is intense. And of course, this is a very crucial moment in the life of any politician who wants to run, because of course, a few months' time we'll be having general elections. So that's why I think it's so tough.
Yes, the direct primaries entail that all card-carrying members will come and express their wish. And we're already seeing casualties. Apparently, some of the senators are lucky they have had their tenure given opportunity to contest again. Several key senators are actually losing out. Some of them actually, in fact, withdraw, are not standing in elections because of the challenges that are coming there. So it's positive development for our democracy. But the internal democracy is still a critical challenge.
All right, Bayo, thanks. Let's just clarify something. I'm just going through some of the details of the story now with regard to the World Bank forecast. The Punch, as I said earlier, was reporting that the World Bank has cut the Nigeria and others growth forecast to 2.7%. That's for sub-Saharan Africa as an aggregate. The initial projection was for Sub-Saharan Africa to grow by 3.1%, but now it's 2.7%. But specific to Nigeria, that's what the New Telegraph is reporting and saying that Nigeria's own growth forecast for 2018 will be 1.9%.
Well, it's been vacillating between 1.7, 1.9, and the expectation that it will grow to about 2%.
The picture is clearer, you know, from what the New Telegraph reported.
Specific to Nigeria,
rather than Africa.
The Sub-Saharan Africa. And the president's call to Leah Sharibu's mother is very significant. There's no doubt about that. I mean, you heard people, some persons will say, oh, no, why are you calling him? Why are you calling her this time? Get your daughter released. I mean, negotiating with the captors is an arduous task, and it's very delicate as well. And the fact that the president has put a call through to the mother is quite reassuring. Yes, it's quite reassuring, because you had seen some, well, I mean, pardon the expression, some busybodies who were already latching onto this, you know, to take out an action against the government for not rescuing Leah Sharibu. And the mother coming out to say, look, we are not party to this particular action. All we need is for our daughter to be returned safely.
Unfortunately, you know, when such sad development happens, people tend to have various perspectives to it. There is the religious perspective, there is also the political perspective, but what every parent will be of concern with, put yourself in the shoes of Mr. and Mrs. Sharibu. If your daughter is taken away, it is going to be an agonizing deal, and that is from the perspective that the president felt that talking to them directly will be very, very reassuring.
Yes, and if you look at the Daily Sun, the main headline in Daily Sun is just exactly what we have just, Kingsley has just raised. I will rescue Leah, Buhari tells mom. Phones abducted Deputy schoolgirl's mother. And then just beside the nameplate of the Daily Sun, we have Ambode, it's over. After putting up a fight to get a party ticket, Lagos governor finally throws in the towel. Congratulates Shaul.
All right, and very quickly from the New Telegraph newspaper, below the nameplate of the New Telegraph, you have a window of 4 headlines there. We'll take the last 2 of the headlines. Senators lament losses at primaries, say exercise is sham. That's on page 35 in greater detail. And 2019, NDDC MD Ekere escapes assassination in Akwa Ibom. Details of that story can be found on page 35. Bayo, before we take the editorial, there's a story out of Plateau with regard to the pond that is being dredged around the Jos area to try to get the remains, if at all, of the general who went missing last month.
Yes, you recall that on September the 3rd, it was, Brigadier General Al-Kari, retired, was traveling between Abuja and Potiskum, and all of a sudden he disappeared. And the army, the chief of army staff, actually constituted a task force that has been combing a pond at a place in Jos South local government. So far as at last Saturday, the general's car was pulled out, but subsequently after that, one red saloon car with a Bauchi plate number and another bus with a Plateau bus plate number have been pulled out of the pond. You recall that when the task force approached combing the pond, villagers, women came there to restrain them, saying that any interference with that pond always causes bad luck to their husbands and sons, and they tended to die. Therefore, they resisted. But the army insisted that they must get to the bottom of that. And at the burial of 3 soldiers that were killed in the Operation Safe Haven, the chief of army staff has made a critical observation. He says there exist armed ethnic militia groups in Plateau State. And he says that the ethnic militia are sponsored and supported by some elite and elders. He lamented that something has to be done.
That's a big one, because this issue of militias, rising in different communities in the country is really a threat to the security of this country, because the militias cannot be identified easily. They are not uniformed men, right? So it's really a bad news for this country if we keep allowing such militias to exist in different parts of the country.
All right, Bayo, the story of the mystery pond in Jos is a running one. Yes. So we will get to know whether it's a Bermuda Triangle that we have in that location or otherwise. But there is a health issue which we're not going to have enough time to discuss now. We'll get into that with regard to the state of some of those ponds in and around the Jos area. There were the mining pits that were used in the past. Let's go to our editorial review this morning. It's from the Nigerian Pilot. Details of that can be found on page 3, and the headline is Agenda for Visiting UN Delegation on Humanitarian Mission to Borno. Bayo, that's the editorial. That's from the Nigerian pilot.
Yes, just quickly before I go to the editorial, there's a human interest story. An 8-year-old Nigerian has been awarded a prize that is called Flame of Peace Award. The 8-year-old boy, his name is Kanyeya Chukwu Okeke. He is said to have been a genius who provided a painting that it described peace with art. It's been an intriguing thing. He was awarded by the institute in Austria, and the small boy has been invited by artists to exhibitions in Europe because some of his drawings are said to be very unique. And you know what? The boy had suffered from autism at childhood, and he came out of that to become a genius in art.
Well, if you trace people with autistic, influence, when they are born, they usually, transform to something else. And I'm not surprised to see them because we have such stories, in the past.
All right,
well, the kernel of the editorial, yes, the kernel of the editorial is that it's drawing attention to the UN mission, particularly on the humanitarian initiative for the Northeast. It is emphasizing on the reconstruction, rehabilitation, and resettlement of persons, particularly to create a conducive environment for economic activities to continue. But the editorial is saying that there should be concern also for other states of the Federation where there are also persons that have been displaced, identifying Zamfara, Plateau, Benue, Southern Kaduna as some of such spots that also should deserve such kind of attention.
Bayo, that's the much we can take. See you tomorrow.
Thank you for having me today.
Okay, it's Good Morning Nigeria. We take a short break now. When we return, don't forget we have 2 items to discuss, housing for workers as well as the phenomenon of out-of-school children. All right, you're welcome back. If you just joined us, it's Good Morning Nigeria. We are reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, in what stakeholders have described as a potential landmark boost towards housing development in the country, the Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria, in conjunction with leading labor unions, is set to launch the implementation of a national affordable housing delivery program for workers. And while organized labor is still, as it were, bargaining for decent take-home pay, now the question is, how ready is the proposed program on housing really going to take the workers to their respective homes? Joining us in the studios this morning to discuss this issue in greater detail, we have the Managing Director and Chief Executive of the Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria, that's Architect Ahmed Dangiwa. Architect Dangiwa, pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you. Good morning.
And also here with us in the studios is Barrister Musa Lawal. Barrister Lawal, of course, is the Secretary General of the Trade Union Congress of Nigeria. Pleasure to have you with us on the program this morning.
And all right, gentlemen, you're most welcome to this edition of the program. Let me start by asking the Managing Director and Chief Executive of the Federal Mortgage Bank about the Affordable Housing Delivery Program. Well, the housing deficit in Nigeria is alarming, going by the available records. Now, educate us on what this Affordable Housing Delivery Program is all about.
Well, good morning. The meaning of that affordable housing is to allow Nigerians in the lower cadre, that is the low and medium income earners, who are the contributors to the National Housing Fund, to afford a house that they can call their own. Over time, you'll find that most of the houses you find it's unaffordable to these contributors due to the fact that the houses being built by the developers in town, you find that due to the other factors that militate against it, they are very, very difficult for them to afford them. In the sense that a developer, you can't blame the developer that borrowed money at over 20% interest rate, and he bought the land at a higher rate. He also has to put in the cost of the infrastructure. All these factors factored with the cost of building materials that is skyrocketing. You'll find that at the end of it, when the houses are built, the low and medium income earners cannot even afford to buy the houses. They can't even afford to approach us for a mortgage, because you'll find that their salaries cannot buy that house for them. They can't afford it. A salary earner, usually, if he gets a mortgage, 1/3 of the salary is being deducted monthly to pay over the period of his remaining years in service, to be paid into the house. So most of the civil servant that and the level 8 officer that will start work even from now, that has 30 years to retire, you will find that by the time you factor 1/3 of his salary times 30 years in 12 months, you'll find that the house, he can't afford more than 8.5 or 9 million naira house, maximum 10 million naira house. And if a house up to that level, it's unaffordable to most of these contributors to the National Housing Fund.
So who exactly are the target contributors for the affordable housing program? And in which parts of the country will this obviously be rolled out?
The target audience, as you rightly said, are the contributors to the National Housing Fund, who are the workers in the federal civil service, in the states and even federal, and even workers in the public sector, because contributors to NHF are all in the formal and informal sector of the economy. You'll find that the essence of creating the NHF, National Housing Fund, is to mobilize long-term funds. And to create a long-term fund is to mobilize long-term funds for mortgage to individuals, especially who are the contributors. So over time, there was a collaboration, an MOU between the Nigerian Labour Congress, the TUC, Trade Union Congress, and NECA, to come and sit down and see what we can do to contribute our own quota towards creating this affordable housing. So through our meetings with them and collaboration, we now resolve that let's take 2 states per geopolitical zone across the country, and then we add Lagos and Abuja as special cases. So 2 times 6, that's 12 sites, then plus Lagos and Abuja makes it 12 sites. This is what we are going to start as a pilot project, and it's going to be launched by next week to commence these 100 houses in various states, in this state of the Federation. We intend to have the houses into 2 forms. There is a block of flats where we have land constraint, and then we have also the semi-detached bungalows where we have enough land to construct it, over 5 hectares of land, then the other ones over 2.5 hectares of land. We approach the state governments to give us land in order to boost the affordability of we are not going to buy the land per se, so that if the state governors can give us that land, we build these houses in their own states. It's the civil servant in their own state that will benefit from this product. So that's our own plan, and is set to launch.
Okay, MD, we'll return to you on, of course, on the role of the private sector in the entire project. But now let's go to Barrister Musa Lawal, Secretary General of the Trade Union Congress of Nigeria. Now, organized labor is still bargaining for a decent take-home pay, and what we're talking about here is affordability. Now, is this a good program for the Nigerian worker?
In fact, let me say that this is the greatest period a worker should be happy. Apart from diseases, the greatest killer of workers is after retirement, you are still paying rent. That kills workers a lot. Because a man who retired with nothing and is still paying rent, the presence of the landlord in his house is enough to send him to the world beyond. So with this affordable housing program, it means that over the period of your work, you'll be able to own a house and retire to. That is a life-saving thing for us. As far as I'm concerned, it's a glorious period for us, and we are very happy about it.
You're talking about a glorious period. This is just the early beginnings, Mr. Lawal. What is the role of the umbrella labor bodies in this program?
Yes, like you said, we have had an MOU to work with Federal Mortgage Bank so that we can have houses for our members. Don't forget that we have what we call National Housing Fund, where workers contribute to. So the contributors will be entitled to a house at the end of the day, and they pay over a period of time. And if you consider that Nigeria is lowly paid, there's no way a worker, for example, on 18,000 naira can actually own a house of his own. So that's why I call it a glorious period. Because at the end of the day, a worker, even a minimum wage worker, will be able to own at least 1 bedroom at the end of his working life, to manage his life. So if you remove payment of rent at the end of your working life, then you are sure to live longer. And that means that at the end of the day, you are a happy worker. And that is why we are very happy about the cooperation that started in 2013 and is still working fine. the labor centers make sure that all states that are not contributing, we convince them to pay that, look, your workers will not be able to own their houses of their own. When they contribute to this, at the end of the day, they will own one. And a happy worker is a worker who knows that at the end of the day, he's not retiring to rent payments. So that's why the labor centers are very active. And with cooperation with NECA, we formed a technical committee that is driving the process.
Now, Architect Dengewa, I met you in Enugu sometime this year at the launch of a housing project, which was, of course, put together by a private person. Now, what is the collaboration all about? And in such collaborations, are workers included in that kind of package which involved a private sector developer?
Well, they are involved. Now, these houses that we are going to launch, the pilot houses, are going to be built by the developers under the umbrella of REDAN, which is Real Estate Developer Association of Nigeria, whom we are also in contact with, in collaboration with, in order for them to understand with us the rates of these houses are not the normal contractor that they are going to find. And it's a loan that we are going to give these developers to go and develop these houses. And then once these houses are built, then the PMB, the private mortgage bank, will come in and then mortgage the houses to the contributors to the National Housing Fund. So we have been in collaboration, constant collaboration with the developers. That's the private developers who has been a partner to Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria. So I assure you that their contribution is of paramount importance to this program, in as much as we tried as much as possible to source these developers from various states of the Federation.
All right, let's get the chain of relationship involved in all of this before you get to the beneficiary who is the worker. Federal Mortgage Bank is providing facilities to REDAN.
Yes.
And REDAN is building the houses.
Yes.
And then REDAN will now hand over to primary mortgage institutions, yes, which will now also mortgage the properties, yes, to the Nigerian worker. What is the control of the labor unions and the Federal Mortgage Bank over the transactional cost that is likely to occur in all of this, so that the end cost that the worker picks up isn't one that is well beyond his pocket, and thereby defeating the objective of the entire program?
Well, ab initio, it was this MOU, the collaboration between the labor centers and the Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria, that initiated the project. They initiated in the sense there's a technical committee that was set up to provide the designs. We look at the designs precisely to be affordable designs, and even the costing, to ensure that the costing reaches or is targeted towards our target contributors in such a way that, so this collaboration was done even before it reaches the developers. The developers just find an end product. This is the designs we want you to implement at so cost, and this is how it's going to work. And once you finish it, we'll now hand over to primary mortgage banks, who will now mortgage it to individuals, who will profile the individuals and then take it. Labor centers are also there. They have been in touch with their states, various state offices or branches, both the Nigerian Labour Congress, the TUC, and the NECA. They have been in touch with their own state unions. These state branches are in constant touch with our branch office in various states of the Federation, even to pursue the site. As a joint letter was signed between both the four of us to the state governors, and it was delivered jointly to these state governors in order to give us an accessible land that can be used to develop these houses. In some of the states, we even went further to inform the state governors, if you can do the infrastructure for these estates, it's going to further reduce the affordability, it's going to further increase the affordability and reduce the cost to your own contributors in your own states. And some state governors have taken that challenge. They intend to give us the land and then do even the infrastructure. So the cost is going to be different from the state that have not provided the infrastructure that they have just provided.
And as you said, you're taking 2 states per geopolitical zone, which is 12 plus Abuja and Lagos.
Yes.
Okay, Kingsley, let's, because time is actually not on our side at this moment, Barrister Musa Lawal, what will likely be your final thoughts on this? Now, you are so optimistic that these glorious moments for workers. Now, are you considering the financial capacity of these workers in terms of their contribution? We have different grade levels, and at the end of the day, one could spend 30 years not being able to contribute what could actually put a house together. So, what about the take-home of workers in this connection as to whether they have the capacity to even make enough contribution that will enable them own a house?
First and foremost, there is a basic principle of the National Housing Fund that every worker should contribute 2.5% of his basic salary. We are thinking now that to ensure that this affordability process gets to us, we are thinking that we should change it from 2.5 of the basic to put 2.5 of the total pay. Meanwhile, remember that we are already fighting for new minimum wage. We think that by the time the new minimum wage comes, the chance of workers contributing enough to own a house will increase. But even at that, we are not saying the workers should use their salary to go and buy. They contribute up to a certain level, and at the end of the day, the mortgage institutions take over. And it's going to be a long period, 15, 20 years. So literally contribution up to that period will provide an accommodation for a worker. If it's a low-earning worker, it could take 1-bedroom flat. Then we have 2-bedroom. We will have bungalows, and what do you call the big ones. So it depends on your level. At the end of the day, there's what we call a test, affordability test, that will provide you where you belong and what you can buy. So it's not just that you are earning 18,000 and you want 3-bedroom flat. It's not possible. So there's a process.
All right, I'm just wondering, just before we'll let the gentleman go, Architect Dangiwa, some persons would most likely ask themselves this question: how is this program going to be any different from what they had in the past? Hopes raised, hopes dashed. And you have all kinds of propositions with regard to providing affordable housing, and yet what you find in most cities, Abuja in particular, it's empty housing estates, which well beyond the reach of the workers. Some years ago, some 100,000 houses that were supposed to have been provided. The federal government public service also has what it calls FISH, I think, and we've had the opportunity of discussing that on this program. So what will make this different?
Well, it's going to make a difference in the sense that ab initio there was a proper planning. Proper planning in the sense that there's MOU and a collaboration, a technical committee was set up. At the same time, you'll find that we engage, not only the developers, we engage consultants who will monitor these developers to ensure effective delivery and timely. The other factor is the fact that when these houses are delivered, the bank went ahead before now to reduce the equity contribution of those off-takers who want to own these houses. Before, you have to pay 30% for a loan that is above 10 million naira. Now it's reduced to only 10%. You have to pay any house above 5 million, you have to pay 20%. Now it's reduced to 10 million, to 10%. For any house that you have to buy less than 5 million, is zero equity now. So that kind of reduction in equity makes it more affordable to these Nigerian workers to who they can now afford and then buy their own houses. And
So, time is up, and we would like to thank you for coming and making these explanations to Nigerians who, of course, in dire need to own their own house, especially workers. Architect Ahmed Dankiwa, Managing Director, Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And Barrister Musa Lawal, Secretary General, Trade Union Congress of Nigeria, TUC. Thank you for your thoughts.
Thank you.
All right, and the second leg of our conversation this morning is on out-of-school children in Nigeria. We'll be back in just a moment. This is Good Morning Nigeria.
You are watching NTA, Nigerian Television Authority. For more information and news updates, visit our website at www.nta.ng, or you can follow us on Twitter at NTA News Now, or you can like us on Facebook at NTA Network News. Stay connected on our YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/NTA News Online. Watch our live stream at www.nta.ng/live. NTA, You can't beat the rich.
Now, to kickstart our conversation on the growing number of out-of-school children in Nigeria, let's take this background report put together by our correspondent, Aisha Obali.
The right to education is one of the core fundamental rights of children who are of school age. Over the years, government and development partners have continued to show their worry in the increased number of children who are out of school. With the increase in population growth putting pressure on Nigeria's resources, public services and infrastructure, statistic has it that children under 15 years of age are accounting for 55% of the over 180 million population, making the burden on education increasingly overwhelming. The same report has it that more than 30% of school-aged children, particularly in northern Nigeria, do not have access to basic education. Reasons accumulating from many factors such as cultural attitude, lack of educational facilities, and insecurity as a result of the insurgency. Other concerns borders on the quality of education and factors that have contributed, including low motivation, lack of quality teaching and learning materials, as well as inadequate teacher preparedness, among others. According to UNESCO Institute of Statistics, about 262 million children and youth are out of school for the school year ending in 2017 on the global stage, totaling about 64 million children of primary school age, 61 million of lower secondary school age, and 138 million of upper secondary age. Observers have attributed low perception of the value of education for children as a major reason why the country has continued to record increased number of out-of-school children. With more prevalence rate of out-of-school children, what is the worry of stakeholders? What is government doing to monitor the programs initiated to checkmate the worrisome situation? These questions and more will be answered shortly on the program.
All right, thank you very much for that backgrounder. We have three guests with us in the studios this morning to discuss this issue. First, we'd like to welcome the Executive Secretary of the Universal Basic Education Commission, UBEC. That's Dr. Hamid Boboyi. Dr. Boboyi, pleasure to have you on the program.
Thank you.
Also here with us in the studios is the Emir of Argungu, that's in Kebbi State, His Royal Highness Alhaji Samala Mohammed Mera. Alhaji Samala, pleasure to have you with us on the program.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
And also right here with us in the studios is the country representative, UNICEF Nigeria, Mohammed Fall. Mohammed Fall, delight to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, gentlemen, it's good to have you join us this morning on this program, and we are actually handling a very critical issue. And let me begin with the Executive Secretary of UBEC. So there is this outcry over the actual number of out-of-school children in Nigeria. Now, put us through, what is the true position, and how much of a concern, should this be for a nation like ours?
Thank you very much for the question. It is an issue that we have raised in this place several times about the problem of out-of-school children in Nigeria. Looking at the figures that are there, isn't it? And again, current figures are a little bit, isn't it, hard to come by. And also looking at the various sectors. If you look at the primary school sector, so many figures have been bandied around by, the Nigerian Education Data Survey of 2015. Later, updates were done by various agencies, including UNICEF and other organizations. The figures seems to be fluctuating between the crisis point, particularly during the insurgency in the Northeast, between 13.5 million to a more sedate figure, perhaps of 8.7 million, isn't it, of recent. But the issues that we need to understand is that, looking at the various sectors, looking at the population of our children who are supposed to be in school, the various age groups that are supposed to be in primary school, the age group that are supposed to be in junior secondary school. The figures that we are bandied around, that have been bandied around would depend upon which sector you are looking at. If you are looking at the primary school, sector, you may find, yes, the 8.3 million is, maybe 8.7 million may be a reasonable figure. Look at the junior secondary school sector. Our transition rates have been very poor, of people moving from primary 6, to JSS 1, and being sustained in this particular period. There, again, the percentages are much higher. And there are a lot of factors that are out there that seems to actually, aggravate the situation. We have, issues particularly up north. 80% of the number of out-of-school children in Nigeria are contributed by 10 northern states. It's something that we have to take into account. So we have to understand, looking at the situation, what are those segments within northern society that have been causing, this particular, the bulge in the numbers as far as the north is concerned. We have to look at the issue of the Al-Majiri sector, where, in many of the northern states, there are more children in Al-Majiri schools than there are in the conventional public schools. In many areas, again, you find the worrying, particularly in the north again, the worrying phenomena of girls who are out of school. I think it has been said by, was it UNICEF or something, if northern Nigeria were to become a country on its own, it would have the worst out-of-school girls phenomenon in the world. But again, the issue of the out-of-school phenomenon would have to be looked at the history of northern Nigeria, particularly in terms of conventional education. We have to look at the economic profile of the region, where it has become very difficult, for a lot of, either in terms of child labor, where parents would want their children to work, in terms of other attitudinal issues, and you find that much of the girls who are even out of school, are those who are hawking wares, perhaps, that cost only 200 naira, the entire, wares that they have is on account of 200 naira, per day. It has become very difficult for this girl to attend school because the parents depend on this particular income. And then we have to also look at the supply side, where the will by many of our governments, and we shouldn't forget that fact that education, primary education, is an affair of local and state governments, The federal government intervention, has always been there, but the federal government cannot make that impact unless and until state governments are prepared to also do the kind of investment that can make the difference.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Boboyi, for your elaborate initial remarks. Let's bring in now Mohammed Fall of UNICEF. The UNICEF is one of several bodies that sometimes would release the figures pertaining to out-of-school children in Nigeria. For some years, we were grappling with the figure of some 10.5 million. From what Dr. Boboyi is saying, now there would appear to be some differences with regard to the actual numbers. What are we looking at here, either in terms of aggregate numbers of out-of-school children in Nigeria or disaggregated out-of-school children, primary, out-of-school children, school children, junior and secondary?
Thanks very much. First of all, thanks for having me in your program. I'm delighted also to be with key partners such as the Sultan Foundation for Development and Peace, Universal Basic Education, that are working with us tirelessly to address some of the challenges that children are facing in Nigeria. Coming back to your question, we can have a discussion and technical issues about how the estimation is. We talk about 10.5 million using household survey that has been organized 2 years ago, looking at also the age bracket of 6 to 14. But despite some variation that we can have here and there, I mean, the realities that we have in front of us is that we are talking about several million of children missing the chance to get to education. And I think that's really the challenge that we face today, whether it is 8, 9, 10.5, 13, the number of children that are not accessing to education in Nigeria counts for a lot. And at the same time, the number is not evenly divided in the country. We realize that most of these out of school are found in the northern state. 33 to 34% of children at this age, at the age of going to school are not accessing to education in the northern part, while if you go to the southern part, this number is much lower. It's around 10 to 11, according to our estimate. What is important, I think, is that as our partner from UBEC was mentioning it, there are so many factors that we need to look through to address this big challenge. There are factors that are linked to the perception of what is called modern schooling. There are factors that are linked to the economic situation of the population. There are factors that are linked to the service that are available, teacher, classroom, teaching and learning material. There are factors that are linked to the poor learning outcome, because parents also are not inclined to send their children to school if they don't see a valuable outcome from this learning process. There are factors, like it has been mentioned, in the Northeast that are linked to the security situation and to the threat that are floating on the education system or on the children who are going to school. What is important is that this initiative we have taken with the Sultan Foundation and the Universal Basic Education Commission to find a way to broaden the partnership, create a strong platform that bring together government at federal and at state level, bring together civil society, bring together the traditional rulership and leader, and bring together the private sector and all of us to join our effort and see how are we going to address these issues. Coming back to the number, what I wanted to mention is that we should not look at it only in terms of or within the boundary of Nigeria. This number we are talking about also has a kind of heavy weight into the overall number of children who are not going to school worldwide. Today we are saying that maybe 1 out of 5 children out of school are from Nigeria, clearly indicating that if we don't address this issue today in Nigeria, probably some of the goals that are set by the international community, like the Sustainable Development Goal, will not be achieved because of the heavy burden that Nigeria carry in this challenge of out of school, globally speaking.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fowl. Let's turn to the Emir of Argungu, Kebbi State, His Royal Highness Alhaji Samaila Muhammad Mera. Whenever I hear Argungu, I remember the fishing festival. All right, but for this morning, we are on a more serious note. Now, what, in your opinion, should be the contribution of people's culture and tradition towards the aggravation of out-of-school children, especially in the north, where the number is rising? You have all agreed that we have more number of out-of-school children in the north than in other parts of the country. So what is, and it's a major factor. So what do you think a religion is doing, sorry, a tradition or culture are doing to ensure, to make this out-of-school system, you know, a normal thing in the part of the north? Because in the north, children, especially girls, are not allowed to go to school.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on behalf of our Sultan Foundation and the Northern Traditional Leaders on this program. I wouldn't want to agree with you that it is part of the culture of people in the northern Nigeria to prevent a girl child from accessing education. Islam is the predominant religion of northern Nigerian people. And in Islam, it is believed that when you educate a girl, you educate the entire community. The education of women is highly, highly recommended and supported by Islam. The major reason, therefore, could not be from our belief. It could be from cultural reasons. Cultural reasons emanating from the people's belief that Western education is foreign, alien, and the way it is formulated and brought to northern Nigeria is contrary to Islam. And the prime movers of the modern education, Western education, are non-Muslims. So this earlier, I believe that it was brought about by aliens from Europe. People who are not Muslims contributed a lot to the suspicion against Western education. Over time, people realized the benefit of education, but other factors, such as the one pointed out by the chairman of UVEC, the executive director of UVEC, and the country reps of UNESCO, of UNICEF, probably are the greater factors. One is and the fact that of recent, parents could not see value in their children leaving what they are traditionally involved in, whatever trade it is, and going to school while, instead of getting the proper education they hope the children will get, they'll end up mostly coming back not understanding or not learning anything from the school and not being able to participate and contribute meaningfully to whatever the family is engaged in. That is a huge factor. A lot of our children have gone to school and you see them coming back worse than they went. Not learning much and bringing in new habits into the community. Another big factor, in my opinion, is the fact that parents expect their children to behave in a more culturally accepted manner. And there's this suspicion that if they are exposed too much, they may not willingly or respect.
You can say that it is critical, when a parent would believe that if a child goes to school and comes back, he will be a different human being altogether. So that is why we're raising the issue of that a cultural factor.
That's a cultural factor. And in a number of cases, that has been proved to be right. Though the majority may not be like that. But it's one of the factors that parents really...
I'm wondering, your Royal Highness, it's the out-of-school children phenomenon of concern to the traditional institutions.
Oh, very much.
And if that is the case, what has the traditional institution done on its own, along, of course, with the elite class in the northern part of the country? We also have the problem in the southeast, for instance, particularly in Ebonyi State, where the numbers are also high. What has the traditional institution done, along with other concerned stakeholders, to ensure that these numbers we're talking about, 10.5 million, it's an embarrassing figure by any stretch of the imagination that these numbers are brought down considerably?
Well, from the very beginning, when Western education was introduced in northern Nigeria, the traditional institution has been in the forefront of trying to promote the benefits of acquiring Western education. It was like 100% their responsibility during colonial era to ensure that children are brought forth from the villages and from the towns to acquire Western education. And they did it very well. And those first crops of northern Nigerians that benefited from it, really brought forth a lot of development in the north, and they demonstrated a high sense of responsibility and commitment to the development of the north and Nigeria in general. But when local government reforms were introduced and new changes in the administration of education and the position of traditional rulers in Nigerian affairs, took all these responsibilities away from the traditional institution. In the past, education used to be handled directly by the native authority, under which the emir has total authority. The movement was very strong. There were even laws that allows people to be prosecuted from not allowing their children to access Western education. But when these responsibilities were taken away from them and given to the local governments and other agencies of government. The government literally, took away everything that has to be do with mobilization of children towards acquiring education away formally from the traditional rulers. But on the side, what we continue to do is, knowing that there is benefit in acquiring it, we continue to sensitize at what opportunity we have to talk to our people to ensure that their children acquire Western education. And of course, religious education, because of the benefits it accrues to the society and to the individual and to the nation as a whole.
All right, Your Highness, thank you very much. We'll return to you in the course of this conversation, but let's go to Dr. Hamid Boboyi. Sir, it was in the 44th session in 1989 of the United Nations Assembly that the Convention for Children's Rights was adopted, and education is a critical element of that convention. Now, how much of this, the elements of this convention has been adopted by Nigeria? Yours is that of basic education, which from the starting point. Now, have we done enough, to, imbibe that convention into our school system to enable our children gain that basic education?
Well, thank you very much, Krian, for the question. The issue of children's rights and the entire basic, the universalization of basic education, isn't it? It's an integral part of it. And the very creation of UBEC, initially MPEC and ultimately UBEC, had been part of the concern of the federal government to ensure that it developed some kind of uniform standards that could help drive the process. The states, our constitution is very clear in that regard, isn't it? The states at one time, isn't it, as well as the local governments, were the ones responsible, isn't it, for payment of salaries. At a point, we went into crises in the 80s, even before 89, isn't it? If you remember the various during the MPN days, isn't it, the problems that actually emerge, where teachers will remain for a long time without being paid. The day that you cannot take care of the teacher, that's the end of basic education. Because you will have no one to go into the classroom, isn't it, to do the teaching. Ultimately, the MPEC came in to pay salaries, up to, if you remember, up to 2002. But the Supreme Council, Supreme Court said, no, you cannot deduct the monies of the various tiers of government from source. So this had to stop. And ultimately, in 1990, when, after this problem, isn't it, discussion started again with the launching of the universal basic education, in Sokoto in 1999, September. Now the whole idea is, what can we do to ensure that this right is enforced? The right of education, the universal, isn't it, universalization of education, where each and every child is given that opportunity. And the potential, and given that opportunity also to see that, isn't it, they develop their own potential. And, at the end of the day, I think this is the challenge that Nigeria is having, where certain inputs are there that unless and until, as a nation, we pay attention to them, there is no way we can bring a teacher, isn't it, number one, we have to look at the entire process in terms of the inputs that government has to put to ensure the realization of what we are talking about. Who goes to teacher education institutions? Those who cannot get other courses in other faculties and departments. So from the beginning, even the recruitment that we have at the pre-service level, we have a problem. Thereafter, again, those even who finish either at the degree level or at, with NCE are also looking for other jobs. Why? Because again, there are no incentives for somebody to remain within the profession. A lot of parents, if they hear their children are going to teach, they shudder with fear. What's going to happen to your future? And at the end of the day, other countries that have been able to organize their system and ensure that learning is taking place within their own schools, the government is taking care of the future of the country. Because without that strong foundation at the basic level, it becomes very difficult as a nation.
Yeah, Dr. Boboyi,
Yes,
I would like you to also address this issue, whether from the demand side or from the supply side, with regard to dealing with the out-of-school children phenomenon. Why does it appear that the sensitization efforts have not yielded the desired results in pushing up demand for schooling by children who are currently out of school or those who are being born, and thereby dealing with some of the cultural challenges? And why, on the supply side, has it been also apparently a challenge for some of the governments, subnational governments, to provide the basic, the ambience, to meet the demand for education by those who are being born or those who are already out of school?
No, I think if we look at the issue of sensitization, we need to look at the level at which it had been done. The Emir of Argungu, His Excellency, His Highness the Emir of Argungu, has drawn attention to what used to happen before 1975, where emirs were those who were responsible for primary, even secondary education. All of us who went to school in the north, knew that, the native authorities were the one paying the salaries, they were the one providing the books, they were the one providing the allowances for each and every child. And each and every one of us got a good education. Of course, later changes took place, and we have to understand the implication of these changes. Some of them had been negative, some of them had been positive. But at the end of the day, I think we disable that particular section of our society, the emirs, the chiefs, and the others, who are supposed to do the necessary mobilization to get us through. What did we establish? We established mobilization officers at different levels, at the local government level. We established, even when SUBEBs were created, each SUBEB has got a mobilization officer that, who is supposed to, link up with the other sectors of the community to ensure that these things are there. And that's what has brought us today to this place. Say that, now we have to look at this thing from a different perspective.
Dr. Boboyi, please take this along in your explanation. The local government reforms following the Dasuki panel of 1976 affected the entire country. So if, say, in most parts of the South, you didn't have this dysfunction of, say, the native authority no longer being in charge of education, and yet the phenomenon of out-of-school children is less of a problem in the South than it is in the North. How do you explain that?
Yes. Look at the history again. Let's go back to the history. Please, we have to understand what was happening in the North and what was happening in the South. Education started as an early period in the South. A situation whereby, people who are going to UK to study law, when did we have our first graduate in the North? In the 40s. And then subsequently, the one that actually did was in 1960. So at the end of the day, we have to understand the different histories, and the role of organizations, particularly Christian missionary organizations. The entire system in the South was also pioneered by them. That's what I was saying even the last time I was in Onitsha. Basic education, particularly, in most of the areas of the southern parts, had been pioneered not by government, but by other agencies. Government had to come in specific areas. Up north, the history was such that people feared sending their children. It was a reality. People used to hide. I remember even myself, when I wanted to go to, my father who was a headmaster, interestingly in Yola, I was growing up with my maternal uncles and so on and so forth. My grandfather said, no, don't go to this school. You are wasting your time. Go to this Madam Alarama, X. 10 years, you become another Modibo, another Alarama. But my father stood his ground and said, no, he must go to school.
And we are glad to have you in the studio this morning.
And additionally, I want to add that the traditional institution in the North was completely different from the traditional institution in the South, in the roles we play and the responsibilities we had to our people. The organization in northern Nigeria was so close to perfection that the Europeans, when they came, they did not set up a parallel administration with the traditional institution.
So-called indirect rule.
So they used indirect rule. And the responsibilities for education, for security, and every other agriculture, all remained within the palaces of the emirs and chiefs across the region. While in the south, like Dr. Paboy mentioned, the current traditional leadership they had was mostly like warren chiefs and so on that were appointed because the system, as we had in northern Nigeria, wasn't in existence in some of the eastern states.
What you are saying, therefore, is that by implication, the local government reforms shattered not just
it had
the foundation
a very serious impact on what happened
in
to
the northern
education
part of the
in
country
Nigeria.
under the emirate system.
Yes.
Now, Kingsley, the initial comments that were made, beginning starting this program, pointed to the fact that there are cultural and traditional challenges up north, which is why the preponderance of the school dropouts are on the very high side. Now, Kingsley, let's return to the country rep of UNICEF in Nigeria, Mohammed Malik Fall. Mr. Fall, I know it's of interest to UNICEF, that pupils or children go to school. Now, you have listened to the Emir of Argungu and, of course, Dr. Boboyi, and you have a clear understanding of what the factors are, what the problems or challenges really are with respect to what's happening up north. Right. Now, what will be your contribution to, bring some kind of amelioration or rebuilding of, schooling culture up north from UNICEF point of view?
Thank you very much. Let me first maybe make a comment in the part of the discussion that took place previously, because you referred to the Convention of the Child Right. We refer to the legal and moral obligation to get children at school. But I just wanted to add also the economic dimension of it. Today, if you look at Nigeria, by any standard, it's the biggest country in sub-Saharan Africa. I mean, demographically speaking, economically speaking, and politically speaking, let's say it. But for me, the only way you can sustain this kind of situation, this leadership that Nigeria has today, is to invest in education. Unlike the 19th century, 18th century, where welfare economy were driven by, industry, by some other factor or by some other forces, today we are in a world where everything is driven by knowledge and skill. If you don't educate a child, you are not building properly your future. Someone say, show me what your education system is today, and I will tell you what your economy will be tomorrow. And I think that's the point we need to add to the legal and to the moral obligation of addressing this out of school. Now, what I wanted to add is that education is not the only area where we have seen cultural aspect or perception being a challenge. With His Royal Highness, we have an experience, which is humanization. Eradication of polio. When you talk about Nigeria in this case or in this respect, few years back, not too long, up to 2014-13, we were talking about 100 cases of polio. We were talking about vaccinator maybe even being attacked or killed because of rumor around vaccination. But thanks to the commitment and thanks to the drive of the traditional leadership and rulership, we have seen that today Nigeria is in the last mile of eradicating polio. You don't hear any more vaccinator being killed because of rumor or because of false belief around polio. That to me is extremely eloquent into the kind of partnership and into the kind of role that I can see the traditional rulership bring into addressing the out of school. If this partnership that we are looking towards, this conference with Sultan Foundation for Peace and Development, with the Ministry of Education, with the Universal Basic Education Commission, and to which we want to bring all the segments of society, I'm sure we are setting or we are engaging in the right path of addressing the issue related to out of school. But as I say, it's not only one factor that is driving the situation. It's a multifaceted situation where you mentioned it, the supply side, the demand side, and within each of these sides, you have different aspects that need to be addressed. But this broad coalition that we are looking for, and that's what UNICEF want to help to build, we are on the right path of addressing it, as we have done it for, as I say, polio or some other challenge that has been faced by children in
Mr.
Nigeria.
Fall, the polio analogy you just raised is significant, that it's taken to perhaps provide some guide for the stakeholders in ramping up the figures of enrollment for school children, as well as transition from primary to junior secondary. But just before we go back to His Royal Highness as well as Dr. Baboy, do you have a comparative example that you can probably use to illustrate what stakeholders need to do to get the right results from other countries, or even from your country, Senegal, where, I mean, if you say, look, in this country, we used to have so many out-of-school children, but by the time they did 1, 2, 3, or X, Y, Z, we now started seeing the numbers of out-of-school children plummeting and the school enrollment figures rising.
There are a number of examples because, today we are talking about close to 55, 60 million of children out of school worldwide. 2, 3 decades ago, we were talking about 200 million. It means the situation is changing. And I personally work in this area even when I was much younger in my own country, and I could see how the change have taken place in a very short time in terms of allowing children to access. As I say, it takes a lot. It takes to the point that people think in a different way. We tend to think in our region that basic education means Western education. That's not the case. Basic education means process through which a child acquires key skills in literacy, in numeracy, in solving problems, in analyzing issues, and being beneficial to his or her family and a community. Now, you can get this through a Western education, but you can get it also through a Quranic school. Which kind of reform, which kind of bridge you can have today between the Quranic school and to carry some of those skills that a child needs to be useful for his or her community or her society or her family, that should be a direction that should be taken into account. If we believe that the Western education as it was introduced by the colonial system is the only way we will get access to universal basic education, I think we can be working for centuries and we will never get there. Second, I think we can find modalities that make the learning outcome more relevant to what the community needs. Why should I train a child to come out of a system for which none of the skills he acquired are relevant to the context in which the child lives? If the child is a peasant, if he's a herdsman, if he's industrial, whatever context is, the learning and the outcome of the learning should be adjusted to that need. Of course, also making cost of schooling much lesser for family, because we know it's a big challenge when economic situations are not good for family. We know also that sometimes parents look at the opportunity, the economic opportunity that they are losing by sending a child to school, because if that child go maybe for work, they could bring income to the family. We can look at the way we distribute the school system to the point that the school get closer to the community and that children don't face long distance to work before going to school. We can make the learning environment much more conducive to retain the child, put water, put sanitation, separate facilities for boys and girls. All of this get more female teachers to retain, to attract and retain girls. There are a lot of solutions that has been applied in different contexts and which has yielded significant result in very short time.
All right, Malik Fall, thank you indeed. I was just thinking, Kingsley, of, when you say 65 million children out of school globally, I'm sure you're talking about children from Latin America, Asia, and of course Africa. Right. Right now, we have this Sultan Foundation. You are collaborating with UBEC. Now, what are the components of this collaboration, and how would that change the current trend of out-of-school children, especially with emphasis in northern Nigeria, where it is so prominent?
Our proposed partnership with UNICEF and UBEC, of course, is in trying to create demand by educating, mobilizing, and showcasing the benefits of acquiring both Western and standardizing the access to the Quranic or Islamic education. In Sultan Foundation, we had as members of the Central Working Committee 10 of the most senior traditional leaders of Northern Nigeria. And almost all leaders of the different religious sects we had in Northern Nigeria. We had amongst us professors, people that were exposed in Western education, and of course, the Quranic education. The intention is to use role models to talk directly to parents, to fair advocacy to government, with all the influence this composition has, to try to get more funding for education, more infrastructure for education, and to get our policymakers to focus more on trying to provide an enabling environment where teachers will feel more comfortable in terms of the paycheck they take home, making the profession as much as possible, as close as to what it used to be in terms of glory in the eyes of the generality of the people through discussions, like I said earlier on, advocacies and so on. So that's what we hope to bring to the table. And
in terms of what the foundation is setting out to do, are there targets? Right now, let us assume we're dealing with 10.5 million or 13 million out-of-school children, and 80% of those numbers are from the northern part of the country. Are there targets to say, all right, this is year 2018, by 2020, we want to see the numbers lowered qualitatively, and then, 2023, 2024, we want to see the numbers further lowered qualitatively? Are there such targets? And if so, how are these targets to be realized?
To be able to provide targets that are really as close as possible to reality, we need to have, first and foremost, a census to definitely identify who are the out-of-school children. And what we propose to do after the conference, it's one of the things we're going to discuss in the conference, is to deploy the enormous structure of the traditional institution in northern Nigeria, which covered virtually every settlement. Wherever a person is in northern Nigeria, he's headed by a traditional leader. No matter the side of the city, we have what we call the ward heads or the magaji. We have the village and the district heads up to the emirship level. And within this confines, we would want to use the structure to identify how many children are really out of school. Definitely, against all these extrapolations that brought about this 10.5 million figure. And by knowing them by their names and the families they come from, I think I will be better informed to say, okay, this is truly the figure. And within so period, we want to make sure that so number of children are brought into school.
All right. If I may add,
yes.
I recall that in the last administration, we had about primary schools built for Almajiris. Are you including this category of children in what you're packaging?
I believe the 10.5 million figure covered also the Almajiri. And in our own thinking also, we are also targeting the Almajiri schools, because the Almajiri phenomenon is something of strong importance and worry to all of us as traditional leaders in northern Nigeria. So the census, I hope, will come to perform and bring up forth these figures. I hope we'll be able to bring forth to all our political leaders for action. We'll cover the Almajiri schools, of course. Anybody out of a conventional school, whether he's attending Quranic school, will be part of the census we'll conduct. And I think that will also help us understand better the concept of the Almajiri system. People everywhere in the north are worried about this phenomenon. It's given northern Nigeria a very bad image. I think it will help greatly if through this system we're able to find the different players in the system, and with that understanding, be able to reform and improve on the situation of the children and involve or bring forth some aspects of Western education into the Quranic school system, like Muhammad suggested.
All right, thank you very much. Dr. Baboyi, Sardauna Ahmadu Bello, reputed for a number of achievements, including what we're just discussing now, education. He was reported to have combed northern Nigeria, requesting parents to compulsorily, as it were, send their children, conscripting them to be sent to schools. What lessons are there to learn from that era? That's one. Second leg of my question is as follows. UBEC is one of a number of agencies targeted at helping to boost education and therefore in particular help address out-of-school children phenomenon. We had in the past something about nomadic education. I don't know whether that is still in existence. There is also some agency related to literacy. What will be the collaboration of all of these agencies, assuming the other two I've just mentioned now are still active, in helping to deal with this problem, plus lessons from the Sardauna era?
Thank you very much for the question. Ironically, I was the director of Arewa House, for so many years in Kaduna, the residence of Ahmadu Bello, and we also inherited for the university, Ahmadu Bello University inherited the archives of the northern region. Sardauna was very serious about it because he realized, and that's the interesting thing. In other places, you had universal primary education in the southwest, in the western region as well as the eastern region. In the north, the education was free. But the whole problem was, how do you get takers? How do you get people, to patronize the system? How do you educate parents? How do you, get people, create that demand that was required? And Ahmadu Bello, I think, went out of his way. The emirs at that time, were all very active in terms of the mobilization. But he himself, he made sure that he visited each and every locality in the north. In the Plateau region, in the northeast, everywhere, to ensure that people go. Secondly, he, in 1963, he had a team that went to Libya, went to other places, Egypt, Libya, and other Muslim countries, to see how did they deal with the Al-Majri phenomenon in their own countries. And that committee was chaired by the late Waziri Junaidu, of Sokoto. But the secretary was the emir of Kazaure, who became emir of Kazaure, subsequently, Alhaji Hussein Adamu. And, they got a report to look at how do they develop the entire system. How do you have a situation whereby people can, go through the, the Al-Majri system, in the Quranic system, and then go to the highest levels they want with bridges. And that's how Abdullahi Bayero College, became very prominent in this particular, regard, where you go through the traditional system, but then you go to Abdullahi Bayero College to get a diploma. And a lot of our judges in the north, in the Grand Qadis and so on and so went through this particular system. Those who excel would go to either Cairo, Azhar, or go back to Ruda in Sudan. So this was the system that they developed, But by 1966, it was no longer, put in practice. Otherwise, that problem we are talking about, the Al-Majri system, the whole idea is the integration that was supposed to take place, in that particular system.
Yes. All right, Dr. Hamid.
Sorry, Kirian. I would say has the other leg of the question. I mean, this is the historical perspective it's providing.
Yes.
I know we are pressed for time. If there's anything else you want to say about the Sardauna example, fine.
Okay.
But also relationship with other agencies, nomadic and literacy agency.
Yeah. The head of UNICEF, made reference to the issue of actors acting together in any situation, anywhere in the world where actors are acting, at cross purposes. We will never be able, to put our act together and ensure that, progress is registered within the education sector. Not only the basic education, but every subsector of it. We have nomadic education. It's still there as a commission. NMEC is still there as a commission, and they are functioning. But you see, where the system does not encourage the development of synergy, it becomes very difficult to achieve the result that we are looking for. But we have made a lot of progress. The ministerial action plan by the Minister of Education, isn't it, which had been launched, isn't it, about 2 years ago, created these intersectoral groups, isn't it, where agencies now can work together. UBEC is the one that is coordinating, isn't it, the agencies which are within the basic education sector. We have been meeting with nomadic education. We have been meeting with NMEC. We have been meeting with NERDC. We have been meeting with TRCN. Because the whole idea is that, look here, no one individually would be able to achieve or register any result without all these agencies working together and ensuring that the plans that are put in place to advance basic education are done and done right.
Thank you, Dr. Hamid Boboyi. That's a very good explanation there. Actually, going back to the beginning, the estimation of the number may fluctuate, but the important thing to know is that we have millions of out-of-school children. And in this connection, I'd like to ask Mr. Fall to do his final thoughts by advising.
It's just to come back to what I said earlier. It's a multifaceted challenge. It's not just that you act in one axis to solve the problem. It doesn't take only one entity or one segment of society. It takes that a lot of stakeholders get together, private sector, civil society, communities, parents, state, federal and state level, traditional leaders. But it takes also that we act on the demand at the same time that we act on the supply. And we govern it and we manage it in a proper way. Maybe my final take also is to come back to what I said earlier, highlighting the position of Nigeria in sub-Saharan Africa. Its importance from demographic point of view, political point of view, economic point of view, but its importance also in the share they carry in the burden of out of school in the sub-Saharan Africa and in the world.
All right. Mohammed Fall, country representative, UNICEF Nigeria, we'd like to thank you for your insights, and we do hope that subsequently, that's to say, sometime going forward, when Good Morning Nigeria returns to the phenomenon of out-of-school children, the numbers perhaps will be more pleasant. Fall, UNICEF Nigeria, thanks a lot for being on our discussion this morning. We also would like to appreciate His Royal Highness Alhaji Samaila Mohammed Mera, is the Emir of Argungu, that's in Kebbi State. My colleague Kira was talking about the Argungu Fishing Festival, which used to be very popular. Now you are concentrating on rice farming. That's we have a lot of large rice fields in Kebbi State. I think about 2/3 of the local governments in the state cultivate rice. All right, thanks a lot for being around with us on Good Morning Nigeria, Your Highness. And last but not the least, Dr. Hamid Boboyi. Pleasure having you again on Good Morning Nigeria, Executive Secretary, Universal Basic Education Commission.
You have to go to school, one way or the other.
Yeah, that's why we're very delighted to have had him here. And look at the historical perspective he also gave with what the Salana did and was doing before 1966. Dr. Boboyi, thanks a lot for being around. All right, so let's go over now to our complimentary segments, and here is sports.
Akwa United crashed out of the ITO Federation Cup following a 4-2 penalty shootout defeat to Enugu Rangers in their quarter-final tie at the Sani Abacha Stadium, Kano, on Wednesday. The highly entertaining encounter ended 1-1 in regulation time. Michael Ibe gave Akwa United the lead 4 minutes after the start from a superb free kick. Rangers captain Oke Odita leveled scores for his side 20 minutes from time. The Flying Antelopes prevailed 4-2 in the ensuing shootout, with goalkeeper Femi Thomas emerging the hero after saving 2 of Akwa United's kicks. Nasarawa United will face El Kanemi Warriors in the third quarter-final clash on Thursday at the Eyimba International Stadium, Aba, while Eyimba and Kano Pillars will slug it out at the Pantami Stadium, Gombe, in the final last 8 tie. Meanwhile, Alex Iwobi is in line to make his 8th UEFA Europa League appearance for Arsenal, who face Karabakh in a Group E clash on Thursday. The 22-year-old Nigerian international wore a delectable smile as he boarded the plane at Luton Airport on Wednesday with his other teammates for the long-haul trip to Azerbaijan for the Europa League game. Iwobi has played 4 English Premier League games this season and has totaled 328 minutes in 6 games in all competitions, scoring a goal with 2 assists to his name. He will look to increase his output in the final third in his side's Europa League clash against Karabakh.
All right, and this is where we conclude today's edition of the program, which was two-legged. We first of all had the issue of housing for Nigerian workers, and now the out-of-school syndrome, which we have just concluded. Thank you for being part of it. Tomorrow is yet another broadcasting day, and we will return at 7 o'clock. My name is Kirian Umayo.
Here, you recall when we were in elementary school, there's so-called three-legged race. We tie our left leg, and then you have one, and then you make it. You also sack race and spoon race. All right, so that's we hope our children will take benefit of that when they are in school, and therefore help ramp up the numbers. My name is Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague Kirian, and also appreciated you for being around with us. As I said, we're back tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, do enjoy the rest of your day.